The intercepted radio transmission from the night of March 9, 1945, crackled with static, fragmented words, desperate commands, and an unspoken dread. A photograph, grainy and blurred, captured a distant glow on the Tokyo horizon. A faint orange haze, barely noticeable, yet ominously persistent. Despite this, the Imperial General Headquarters dismissed reports of widespread conflagration, clinging to disbelief. How could a city famed for its wooden architecture and narrow alleys withstand such a fiery onslaught without collapsing into chaos? The paradox was chilling. The Japanese command, so meticulous in intelligence, failed to grasp the scale of destruction brewing above their capital. What was truly missed in that static-filled transmission? Why was the inferno underestimated when its first flickers were already visible? Before the B-29 bombers took to the skies, Japanese military leaders debated the threat level posed by American air raids. They trusted pre-war doctrines that emphasized precision bombing over area destruction, a belief rooted in experiences with earlier conflicts. A weathered map pinned to the wall of the Army's Air Defense Command revealed Tokyo's air defenses, anti-aircraft batteries, and fighter intercept zones, strategically placed but ill-prepared for night raids. The smell of old paper and ink filled the dim room as officers argued over intelligence reports that downplayed the destructive capacity of incendiaries. The engineers at Nakajima, responsible for aircraft maintenance, quietly warned of the B-29's speed and altitude, but their concerns were overshadowed by optimism. How did entrenched assumptions blind the leadership to emerging threats? Was it hubris or a failure to interpret evolving wartime tactics? The B-29 Superfortress was a marvel of American engineering. Pressurized cabins, remote-controlled gun turrets, and a range exceeding 3,200 miles. Its payload capacity dwarfed earlier bombers, able to carry up to 20,000 pounds of bombs, including the devastating M69 incendiaries designed to ignite Tokyo's wooden districts. Yet Japanese analysts underestimated these weapons' effects. A detailed blueprint of the incendiary cluster bomb, carefully annotated by a Japanese ordnance officer, lay tucked away in a drawer, its lethal potential dismissed as theoretical. The bomber's high altitude and speed seemed to render interception improbable. However, the weakness lay not in armor or armament, but in the inability to anticipate the psychological and infrastructural devastation these raids would unleash. How could such a formidable aircraft's threat be so misjudged? Was there a hidden gap in Japanese intelligence networks? On the night of March 9th to 10th, 1945, the 73rd Bomb Wing launched its first major raid over Tokyo, deploying nearly 300 B-29s. The plan emphasized nighttime incendiary bombing to maximize destruction. Expectation within Japanese command was minimal damage, a few fires contained quickly. Yet, eyewitness accounts, captured in hurriedly scribbled diaries and later testimonies, describe a sea of fire swallowing entire neighborhoods. A haunting image from a reconnaissance flight the following dawn shows a cityscape transformed. Vast swathes of streets reduced to ash, landmarks obscured by smoke. The disparity between expectation and reality was staggering. How was this even possible? Why did the headquarters fail to notice the obvious signals of an unfolding catastrophe? In response, the Japanese military scrambled to adapt. Night fighter squadrons were hastily retrained to intercept B-29s, and new radar installations were rushed into service. Leaflets and instructions circulated, urging citizens to prepare fire breaks and extinguishers. A faded poster from the Home Ministry urged vigilance against incendiaries, depicting civilians battling flames with buckets, a stark contrast to the overwhelming scale of the raids. Mitsubishi engineers attempted to modify aircraft engines to enhance fighter performance at altitude, but these efforts lagged behind the rapid evolution of American tactics. Despite these measures, the psychological impact of the relentless night raids eroded morale. What was really hiding behind this illusion of control? Could these piecemeal defenses ever match the scale of destruction raining down? By late spring 1945, Tokyo was a shell of its former self. Resource shortages hampered firefighting efforts, and evacuation routes were clogged with refugees. A classified protocol, stamped top secret, outlined emergency city governance in the event of total destruction, a grim acknowledgement of defeat. Maps charted the fire's spread, red zones denoting areas beyond recovery. The crisis forced the Imperial General Headquarters to confront a brutal reality. Their capital was no longer defensible by traditional means. A report from the Air Defense Command admitted, for the first time, that American night raids had achieved strategic objectives beyond all prior estimates. How did this shift in perception alter Japan's wartime strategy? Was there a moment when hope truly faded? Each episode is a document I pull from the dust of the archives. Share your own stories. Many of you have relatives who lived through that time, and your words help connect personal memory with archival evidence. Stay curious. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode tomorrow. The morning after the firestorm, the city's skyline was unrecognizable. Smoke coiled like serpents from ruins where entire neighborhoods once thrived. A rare photograph, smudged by soot and water damage, shows a group of firefighters huddled under a collapsed wooden beam, their faces etched with exhaustion and disbelief. Radio logs from the day reveal fragmented conversations, frantic reports of spreading blazes, calls for reinforcements, and pleas for guidance. Yet, these cries seemed swallowed by the sheer scale of devastation. The Imperial Command's earlier confidence had shattered, replaced by a grim silence. How could the leadership have reconciled their previous dismissal with this overwhelming reality? What was lost in the chain of command that failed to anticipate such a catastrophic urban inferno? Behind the public facade of resilience, cracks appeared within the military bureaucracy. Confidential memos circulated among senior officers, debating whether the existing air defense strategy was obsolete. A faded map, annotated with new interception zones and radar placements, suggested desperate attempts to recalibrate. Meanwhile, the civilian population faced a growing crisis. Displacement and trauma became daily struggles. An engineer at Mitsubishi recalled in memoirs the frustration of trying to repair damaged infrastructure under constant threat, describing the air as thick with ash and fear. Yet, despite mounting evidence of vulnerability, official communications continued to downplay the raid's impact. Was this a deliberate effort to maintain morale, or a deeper denial rooted in cultural or institutional inertia? How long could such a fragile illusion hold? Amid these challenges, the U.S. forces refined their tactics. Intelligence reports detailed the adaptation of incendiary payloads and timing to exploit Tokyo's vulnerabilities. The B-29 crews, operating under the cloak of night, perfected formation flying to maximize coverage and minimize losses. A declassified target map reveals a chilling pattern. Concentric rings of destruction aimed at disrupting transportation hubs, industrial districts, and residential areas alike. The Japanese anti-aircraft batteries, though increased in number, struggled to respond effectively in the darkness. A squadron commander's post-mission report highlighted the frustration of limited radar range and delayed response times. Why was the Japanese defense continually outpaced? Did the rapid evolution of American strategy expose fundamental flaws in Japan's military doctrine? As the raids intensified, psychological warfare became a hidden battlefield. Leaflets dropped over Tokyo warned of continued destruction, aiming to erode civilian morale. A rare surviving leaflet, yellowed and torn, implored citizens to resist despair, while hinting at the inevitability of further bombings. Records from the Home Ministry show increased censorship and propaganda efforts to counteract the growing fear. Yet, underground diaries speak of anxiety, rumors, and whispered prayers amid the ruins. The Japanese leadership faced a dilemma: acknowledge the scale of devastation and risk panic, or maintain a narrative of endurance and risk losing credibility. What was the true cost of this information war on the home front? Could the government contain a truth that was increasingly impossible to hide? Despite desperate attempts to reinforce Tokyo's defenses, resources were stretched thin. Factories converted to war production struggled to supply materials. Skilled laborers were conscripted or displaced. Engineers worked night and day to repair anti-aircraft guns, but ammunition shortages rendered many ineffective. A schematic of newly developed fire breaks showed innovative but untested methods to halt flames, yet their deployment was sporadic and insufficient. The civilian firefighting brigades, often volunteers with minimal training, bore the brunt of the effort. A poignant photograph captures a young woman, soaked and soot-streaked, wielding a fire bucket amid collapsing buildings, a symbol of both courage and desperation. Why did these brave efforts fall short? Was the scale of destruction simply beyond human capacity to contain? In the war's final months, Tokyo's destruction became emblematic of a broader collapse. Strategic documents from the Imperial General Headquarters reveal a shift from offensive planning to damage control and survival. Maps annotated with red ink marked zones designated for evacuation, while others were condemned to abandonment. Communications between regional commanders expressed despair over dwindling resources and the inability to protect civilians. A radio intercept caught a voice whispering of surrender, unthinkable just months prior. The city's transformation from vibrant capital to a sea of fire was no longer a distant threat, but a stark reality. How did this transformation reshape Japan's resolve? Was there a moment when the illusion of control finally shattered beyond repair? In the aftermath of relentless night raids, Tokyo's urban fabric was irreparably torn. A rare aerial photograph taken by a reconnaissance plane on June 1, 1945, reveals vast swaths of the city reduced to skeletal remains, charred timber frames jutting out like broken ribs beneath a heavy blanket of smoke. The smell of burning wood and chemicals lingered long after the raids ceased, seeping into the memories of survivors and soldiers alike. Yet, within the halls of the Imperial General Headquarters, a disturbing silence prevailed. Internal communications show a marked reluctance to confront the scale of ruin. Reports were sanitized, statistics minimized. How was it possible that such clear evidence was ignored or suppressed? What was the true reason behind this willful blindness to the devastation? Amidst the ruins, the civilian administration struggled to maintain order. A crumpled, water-stained document from the Tokyo Metropolitan Government outlines emergency measures, rationing schedules, relocation plans, and fire prevention protocols. Still, these efforts were hampered by the sheer scale of destruction and chaos. Refugees flooded into less damaged suburbs, overwhelming limited resources. In the shadow of this collapse, underground resistance groups quietly distributed samizdat-style leaflets, criticizing the government's failures and calling for renewed resolve. An eyewitness account from a nurse describes the haunting sight of hospitals overwhelmed by burn victims, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic mingled with smoke. Could the civilian leadership have prevented a complete breakdown? Or was Tokyo's fate sealed once the night raids began? Japanese military strategists, grappling with the consequences, attempted to devise new countermeasures. Secret documents reveal plans to deploy radar-guided night fighters, but technical limitations and fuel shortages stalled development. Engineers at the Nakajima plant labored under blackout conditions to retrofit existing aircraft, only to find the B-29's altitude and speed insurmountable obstacles. A technical schematic, heavily annotated, shows proposed improvements to interceptor armament and engine performance. Ambitious, but ultimately unrealized. The military's fragmented response underscored a deeper problem, a failure to adapt swiftly to the evolving nature of aerial warfare. Why did Japan's industrial and technological efforts falter at this critical juncture? Was there a disconnect between frontline realities and Huaikor command decisions? The psychological toll of the bombings seeped into every layer of society. Diaries recovered from shelters reveal shifting attitudes, from initial disbelief to growing dread and despair. One entry, dated June 1945, describes waking to a city that no longer feels like home, but a graveyard of memories. Propaganda broadcasts sought to bolster morale, invoking tradition and sacrifice, yet their impact waned against the backdrop of nightly destruction. A cracked radio speaker emitted the voice of an announcer reciting patriotic slogans, drowned out by the distant rumble of bombers overhead. How did the collective psyche endure such relentless assault? Was there a breaking point where hope gave way to resignation? As the summer approached, logistical nightmares compounded Tokyo's suffering. Supply lines, already strained by naval blockades and air raids, faltered. Food shortages became acute, and medical supplies dwindled. A blurred photograph shows a line of weary civilians waiting for rations beneath a fading sign proclaiming, "Victory is near." Meanwhile, Japanese commanders debated the strategic value of Tokyo's defense versus conserving resources for other fronts. A confidential memo recommends prioritizing industrial centers elsewhere, implicitly conceding Tokyo's fate. What calculations led to this grim decision? Did the military leadership accept the city's destruction as inevitable, or was it a reluctant compromise? In the final analysis, Tokyo's transformation into a sea of fire was not merely the product of incendiary bombs, but of systemic misjudgment. The disconnect between intelligence, command decisions, and ground realities created a perfect storm. Maps, photographs, and intercepted communications, each a fragment of a larger puzzle, reveal a city caught in the crossfire of innovation and denial. What lessons were lost amid the ashes? Could earlier recognition of the threat have altered the course of history, or was Tokyo's fate sealed by forces beyond its control? In the final weeks before Japan's surrender, Tokyo lay in smoldering ruins, a physical testament to the failure of foresight and the relentless power of modern warfare. A faded, hand-drawn map discovered in a bomb shelter catalogs the city's devastation, blackened zones stretching across formerly vibrant districts, intersected by rivers of ash and debris. Communications between the Imperial General Headquarters and local commanders grew terse, laced with resignation. A transcript from a senior aide speaks quietly of irreversible damage and the need for new strategies beyond defense. The relentless night raids had not only razed buildings, but fractured the illusion of invulnerability that had sustained the leadership and the populace alike. How did this unraveling alter the final decisions made in Tokyo's war rooms? Was the city's destruction a catalyst for surrender, or merely a tragic backdrop? Behind closed doors, the weight of the night, bombings pressed heavily on military and civilian leaders. Emergency protocols gave way to discussions of capitulation, while those outside the command structure struggled to survive amid the ruins. The air was thick with smoke and unspoken fears. A single photograph shows a mother shielding her child beneath a collapsed bridge, their faces streaked with soot and silent despair. Yet, official records continued to withhold the full extent of the devastation, preserving a facade of order until the very end. What truths remained buried beneath layers of censorship and propaganda? How did ordinary Tokyoites reconcile the shattered cityscape with their enduring hope for peace? The story of Tokyo's night firebombing is a mosaic of overlooked warnings, technological leaps, and human endurance. The B-29 raids transformed the city into a vast inferno, far beyond what Japanese leadership had believed possible. The gap between expectation and reality revealed not only the limits of military intelligence, but also the profound consequences of underestimating an enemy's evolving tactics. As the final embers cooled, Tokyo stood as a stark reminder of war's capacity to engulf even the most resilient of cities. What remains hidden in the shadows of the archives may yet challenge our understanding of that fateful chapter.